Dan, thank you for being here with us. My name is Brett Bay, and I'm here as a guest interview with the Rio Grande Citizen. And today we're here with Dan Dow, District Attorney for San Luis Obispo County. Dan, welcome.
Thank you, Brett.
Yeah.
It's really an honor to be here. Appreciate the invitation.
No, the honor's all mine. It's a privilege to sit down with you and chat about who you are, what you do at the District Attorney's Office, and talk about some pertinent legislation that's been passed down in the recent elections, and talk specifically about what you do at the District Attorney's Office and how that correlates with the people here in Rio Grande and the viewers and readers at the Rio Grande Citizen. So we'll kind of jump into it. First off, I don't want your ego to get inflated too much here, but you have an extremely impressive background. And, first off, your military service, you're an Army veteran, you've been on multiple deployments in the Middle East, you're a Lieutenant Colonel, the California Army National Guard. You're fluent in Korean, from what I understand.
I still speak it conversationally. I've probably lost a lot more than what I did know 30 some odd years
Kind of,
ago.
if you don't use it, you lose it. I know with my family, I speak German and then Spanish, and a lot of times my German and Spanish will conglomerate, but if we're not using it, it can kind of get pushed away, but that's extremely impressive. And then you're also topping your class at the Defense Language Institute in Monterey. So impressive background, and I wanted to chat about you specifically a little bit before we get into the district attorney role that you hold here in San Luis Obispo County. So who are you is the most ambiguous question people can ask, but tell us a little bit about you, and then we can go into what does the district attorney do for some of our viewers and readers that don't understand, and talking about your why at the DA's office.
Okay. Well, who I am, I'm Dan Dow. I was born and raised in a small community in Maine, which was much smaller than San Luis Obispo County, but had kind of the same feel of small town America with small town values. In fact, the town where I lived, it had 800 people with 75 miles worth of roads to get across the town. So it was very small. But in the church where my dad was a pastor, had a Revolutionary War cemetery in the back of it. So to give you an idea of the context of it, but very different place in many ways, but a lot of similarities. And I was drawn to San Luis Obispo County when I was attending the Defense Language Institute in Monterey from 91 to 92. So over 30 years ago, spent some time. I was single. I spent some time with other buddies going up and down the coast of California. And really fell in love with from Paso Robles, down to Santa Barbara, and felt like that would be a place I'd love to end up someday. So I served active duty through the end of '94, came to the Bay Area December of '94, January of '95 to start working for my uncle in the Bay Area, and just in construction, and that led for me finishing my undergraduate degree at Cal State Hayward, and then leaving the construction business and going into high tech, and worked in computer sales, and then the dot-com bubble burst in 2000, and my wife and I did not have children yet. We'd been married for 8 years, and decided that it'd be a good time to go to law school, because that had been a kind of a dream of mine, literally from 5th grade. I don't know exactly why, but I was drawn to it at a young age. And ended up in law school. But because I left my Silicon Valley job for Sun Microsystems and didn't have any source of income other than Wendy's, decided to join the Army again. So I had served 8 years. I had a 4-year break, got back in June of 2001. And so I had a little bit of income while I attended law school, and then was deployed because 9/11 happened after starting my first year of law school.
Gotcha.
And got deployed, came back, finished up my law school, and actually I clerked here in the San Luis Obispo County DA's office as a law student.
Wow, okay.
Got a chance
Full circle.
Got a chance to prosecute a DUI as a law student, not yet an attorney. There's a special provision for certified law students where you can do that. And I just fell in love again with the community, but with the office and with this profession of being a prosecutor. And I think the reason for that is it just kind of resonates with kind of the way I was raised in terms of, we all have to be held accountable for what we do. Doesn't mean that we get thrown away or anything, but it means we have to be accountable to the rest of the people in our community that we've harmed. And being able to do that in a way and support law enforcement, come by the side of a victim of crime, help them through what they've been experiencing and promote good order and safety in the community, which is really what drove my desire to become a prosecutor. And then I know we'll talk about my role as the elected DA. I never saw myself as becoming the elected DA. That just kind of a door was opened in 2014 when my boss decided to retire. But my wife Wendy and I raise our two kids. Our daughter now is in college, a sophomore out of state, and our son's a senior at Templeton. And we just love San Luis Obispo County.
Wow, thank you so much. That was a pretty good synopsis. So thank you for sharing. And yeah, it's evident to when even speaking about what you do, it's evident that you have that deep care and compassion. And I really appreciate your sense of your value, and I can see that's instilled from you personally, but that's overlapping into your job. So I'm excited to get more into that in a little bit. I really appreciate. I just even looking at what you have on the San Luis Obispo County District Attorney's website. You're talking about what does the district attorney do? And I'd say if you could extrapolate a little bit more, they talked about the 3 Ps: prosecute, prevent, and protect. Prosecuting criminals who break the law, work to prevent crimes from happening in the first place, and then protect and support those victims of those crimes that have happened. You've already touched on that, but could you elaborate a little bit more on what the district attorney actually does for people that aren't familiar with it?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, we're not the DA doesn't stand for defense attorney. It's district attorney. No, you said it
okay,
correctly.
I was like,
but if I go out in the community and I talk to people and they say, "Oh, here's the DA," maybe 30% of the people will say, "Oh, are you the defense attorney?" And because you're right, a lot of people don't know what the DA does unless they come to court as a juror and get to watch the process, or they might be a witness in a case, or they may be an accused at some point. But what we are the public prosecutor. The office of DA or district attorney is created in the California Constitution, along with the sheriff and the assessor. We're the 3 county officers which are listed in the California Constitution that every county will elect their county sheriff, their county DA, and their county assessor. Yeah, that's the assessor because they collect the money, the taxes, and collect the money. And if people don't pay, then the sheriff can go get it, and the DA can prosecute. I guess that might be the thinking of the founding folks that wrote our California Constitution. But essentially, we handle all of the criminal cases that are investigated in the entire county for violations of state law. And then within the county, we can, in some cases, enforce county ordinances if they've been made misdemeanors, misdemeanor offenses. But we get virtually over 13,000 cases a year referred to our office. We have 113 employees. Only 38 of the 113 are lawyers. We've got 16 investigators. They're law enforcement professionals. They wear guns and badges. They help us prepare for trial, interview witnesses, that sort of thing. We have 16 victim advocates, and they are kind of like a social worker. They work with people who were victimized, and they help them file claims for restitution. They help them know when to be at court. They prepare them for a hearing. Hey, this is what to expect when the DA is asking you questions. After that, the defense lawyer gets a chance to ask you questions, and it might be a little more difficult. And so they're just to be their advocate and assistant throughout the whole process. And then we have a whole assortment of finance, information technology, budget, admin folks that support the rest of our team. And they're really hardworking professionals for our community. So we will review every criminal investigation, as I said, and then we'll decide if there's enough evidence to support filing charges, which is different than just enough evidence to make an arrest. Yeah.
It has to be beyond reasonable doubt to actually make
That's
that.
right.
Okay, yeah.
And in order to have beyond a reasonable doubt, it's more than just, I think somebody committed a crime. It's a substantial burden. So if you look back at the last 10 years since I've been DA, we every year we keep these stats. We file roughly 80% of the cases that are referred to us. And that's sometimes fluctuates, sometimes a little lower, sometimes a little higher. But that's a rule of thumb, about 80%, which means about 20% of the cases that are referred to us, we believe that they can't be filed because there's not sufficient evidence to meet that higher burden of proof, proof beyond a reasonable doubt. It's not that we want to win a case. It's that we truly don't want anybody wrongfully convicted for something that they didn't do, and we want to meet our burden of proof.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we had more time, I could go more into that. But it's really the reason I love to be a prosecutor is that we are seeking the truth, not just convictions.
Yeah.
And we want to, aggressively seek the truth under the framework that we have with our ethical limitations, right? There's certain requirements on us. But we never want to aggressively prosecute where that's more important than fairness to the accused and, having a fair system. Every accused has constitutional rights, and it's the DA's role to ensure that those rights are protected as well. So it's much different than just being a private attorney where you're representing a corporation or an individual, and the whole point is, a financial interest, and you're trying to just win, literally trying to win at all costs within the confines of the legal system. We never are trying to win at all costs, because winning for us is getting to the bottom of it, getting to the truth. And if the truth is innocence, we want that to come out. If the truth is guilt, then that's what we want to come out as well.
Very good. Well, thank you for that overview. And I think it's extremely important for all citizens within San Luis Obispo County and the readers of AG Citizen to understand what you do. And I like that, seeking the truth. And I appreciate that if the truth is innocence, that's what should and you want to prevail.
Absolutely.
So, wow. Well, I wanted to chat a little bit more. One of the main reasons we're here is Prop 36. And I would love to get a little bit more into people weren't educated on what they're voting on. From what I understand, is that's allowing these felony charges and increasing sentences for certain drug and theft crimes. Right. So if you could speak a little bit more on that. And now you were talking about that aggressive prosecution, some people have argued, that's really aggressive, or I would love to hear your take on that and how that's going to be affecting our specific police departments and the county sheriff, how the passing of Prop 36 is going to change the way policing has been done before passing it.
Well, thank you. It really is an important topic, and Proposition 36 was put together by a consortium of DAs, of which I'm a member, the California District Attorneys Association, the sheriffs, but then a lot of business organizations around the state. And then in terms of support, we had very strong support from chambers of commerce up and down the state of California, because the status quo system that we've had up until now changed. It became the system back in 2014 when we, the voters, passed Prop 47, a different number. Prop 47 was described to us by the writers of that one that it was the Safe Neighborhoods and Safe Schools Act, and it was going to make things better by reducing prison population and returning those savings to the communities and putting the money into our schools and neighborhoods. But it really was not accurate in terms of how it represented what it was going to do. The bottom line of what happened with it was it opened the prisons and the jails and started putting people who used to have longer sanction, longer timeouts in custody somewhere for their crimes back into our communities without requiring treatment, either substance abuse treatment or mental health treatment. It just basically put them back into our communities. Yes, they tried to get them some of these treatment options, but because now it reduced, with Prop 47, it reduced crimes that used to be able to be charged as felonies to misdemeanors. People were, when they were committing those offenses in the last 10 years, they've been given a ticket, told, show up to court. They're not booked in the county jail most of the time. If they are, they're just cited out immediately and told go to court. And they often, this population group that we've now seen coming through our revolving door, week after week after week in our court and in every court across the state, they haven't been incentivized to take advantage of the treatment programs that our counties had before and that we still have. And so they've been in a cycle that's been downward spiraling, which has caused many of them, frankly, to become unhoused and homeless and living in really poor conditions. So I think what the voters believed was a compassionate way of dealing with what they thought were low-level petty offenses turned into a situation where we didn't even have the ability now to kind of increase some pressure to get them to take the help that we have for them. And so we've seen smash and grab thefts all over California with groups of people going in, smashing jewelry counters and and taking large amounts of retail merchandise, all the way down to just an individual. A lot of individuals stealing up to $949 worth of merchandise. That's been the limit for a felony, and walking out the door and with no accountability. So prior to Prop 47, we could charge someone entering a building with the intent to steal with either a misdemeanor burglary or a felony burglary. And the law of burglary came to us in the United States from England. It's a common law crime. And it's always been considered a felony, a felonious offense, you know, in England and then here in the United States. So Prop 47 took that long customary law and said within it that if you enter a building, a retail establishment, and steal less than $950, it cannot be burglary. It must be charged as shoplifting. So it essentially, even just the language that we used now with Prop 47, it told the offenders, hey, this is really not a big deal. And I want to just stop for a moment to say we didn't just charge everybody with a felony burglary carte blanche. We looked at the facts of the case. If it was a real minimal amount that they stole, they would be charged with a misdemeanor petty theft. But if they went and they filled up a shopping cart and they're going out, or if they had a criminal history with 3, 4, 5, 6 crimes, maybe similar crimes, maybe dissimilar crimes, but we would still say, well, you've already offended, the law. You've been held accountable. You haven't been learning, so we're going to increase the sanction and charge it as a felony now. And Prop 47 took away all that discretion. We couldn't, if you could have a rap sheet and a criminal history literally 20 pages long, and if you went in and stole $949 or less, today, tomorrow, the next day, and the day after that, it was still treated all as just a misdemeanor without much sanction. So now, Prop 36, the people of California have said, look, we don't like the impact on our economy. We don't like the impact on our safety. And the same with the drug offenses. They were also reduced to misdemeanors to where you, even if you possessed enough to be selling it, if we couldn't prove that your actual intent was to sell it, then all we could charge was a misdemeanor. And so we couldn't force people into treatment for drug possession. And many of the theft crimes are people who are significantly addicted to drugs, and they're trying to get their next fix, so they're continually stealing, and they're in this spiral. And those tend to be a large number of the people that are unhoused, both in San Luis Obispo County and up and down the state. That's why we call it the Homelessness, Drug Addiction, and Theft Reduction Act, because we want to target those things. And by the way, we didn't say, let's just repeal everything out of Prop 47. We picked certain key elements of it to say, the people of California are compassionate people, but they also want things that make sense. And what we had didn't make sense because we couldn't hold them accountable. So now we can aggregate multiple theft crimes to reach the 950 felony level if we think that's appropriate. Also, if somebody has two, as of when this election gets certified, if someone has 2 prior convictions for petty theft or 2 prior drug convictions, then that new drug offense or that new theft offense can be charged as a felony. And these will fall into a category called treatment mandated felonies. And today, treatment can be offered, and it is offered, but because there's no stick, anything being held over their head in terms of punishment, they're just not taking advantage of it. And so this will give the court the ability to order the treatment. And if the defendant doesn't want to cooperate, doesn't do it, or they're unsuccessful after multiple attempts, then the last resort is, okay, since you have a felony and you didn't do the treatment or you didn't succeed on the treatment, we're going to have to give you a longer timeout, either in county jail or in state prison. But this is not at all intended to fill up the prisons or our jails. It's to give DAs and judges
that discretion,
and ability to increase sanction where we need to. I mean, I've got 2 kids. They're 19 and 17. Thank God they've been pretty good. But we all have made decisions, in our life that were against what we were told either by our parents or some other authority. And if sanctions weren't increased, we don't learn, as human beings, And so
I think we
that's what this
crave
is all
that
about.
structure. We crave those boundaries sometimes. So, well, wow, thank you for that. I guess 30,000 30,000-foot overview, but then also kind of deep diving into Prop 36. And I think that kind of led into something else I wanted to chat with you about. And this was, being a veteran yourself, the Veterans Treatment Corp. And I understand that was launched in June of 2013. And just kind of from my research, it seeks to address the growing number of veterans entering the criminal justice system as a result of traumatic experiences they endured while their service. So I wanted to kind of hear a little bit about you, and I guess your efforts behind that, and if there's any correlation between the recent passing of Prop 36 and this VTC.
Right. Yeah. Well, thank you. Veterans Treatment Court, when we started that one in 2013, it predated Prop 47. And so it was very needed at that time. The idea is that the women and men that go off and serve in combat experience a lot of traumatic injuries where, and by the way, we're surviving combat to a much higher number than before because of the miracles of modern medicine and the ability to get people treated on the battlefield, removed from the battlefield, and taken to rear hospitals. So more people in this era are surviving very bad injuries and very traumatic events than what did even as recent as the first Gulf War and Vietnam. So people are returning with those battle wounds, and just like after Vietnam, they deal with that trauma in various ways. And many people turn to the bottle, turn to pills, turn to other ways to try to treat the pain, self-medicate, if you will. And then that leads to addiction and also complications in their personal lives. Some of the people, even without the substance abuse, because of the psychological trauma, find the transition back home to be incredibly difficult. And so you might be happily married or have a happy home before you leave. You come back and you've been shaken up. It's like taking your brain, shaking it up, returning, and things are different. And while you were gone, guess what? Your spouse, your kids, they do things differently than they do before dad or mom left. And that, when you're a soldier deployed, you kind of expect to go back and everything's going to be just the way it was when you left it, because you didn't experience all the change gradually over time like the family did while you were away. So just that disruption and change makes it very hard for the veteran to even feel welcome and safe in their own home. Maybe safe is not the right word, but to feel normal again.
How can you feel normal again after experiencing?
It's so difficult. And so all of those factors drive, many human beings to, try to deal with that dissonance, with that change. And so it leads to, it could be domestic violence in the home because it leads to arguments. Hey, why do you do things that way? I wanted them this way, and we used to do it that way. And then the spouse who was home, who did everything, now felt like, hey, everything was on them. And it's not intentional that they're trying to, offend the returning veteran. It just, life went on. And so this was a phenomenon we were seeing all across the country with veterans getting into the justice system with domestic violence. Interestingly, one crime that happens with high frequency is reckless driving and excessive speed. Because in the combat zone, one of the things you do to get out of danger is you'll drive your vehicle, at excessive speeds in the battlefield to get away. And that kind of feeling here in the U.S., you might not have a real perceived threat, but psychologically, you may feel like you've got a threat, and so you end up driving faster. A lot of reckless driving charges, a lot of domestic violence, and a lot of drug and alcohol. So the Veterans Treatment Court started in Buffalo, New York. A judge there started it because of a lot of people in his community, I think at Fort Drum, were getting in the justice system. And he said, hey, we've got a lot of services available from the VA, Veterans Administration, who can come into this court and help us address the underlying issues. And so in 2012, when I had returned from Iraq in 2011, I met our county veteran service officer at that time, and he saw me on the street. And he said, hey, Dan, I know you came back from Iraq. He had been deployed before under the first Gulf War, and he said, it's Dana Cummings, and Dana said, we need to bring a veterans court here. I said, what are you talking about, a veterans court? And he explained it to me. I researched it, and we formed a community team, including sheriffs, the courts, the county government, and worked for about a year, and we finally put it together. It started in 2013. The idea being that when we identify a veteran in custody or in the court system, and if it's an appropriate case, it's not murder or it's not a sexual abuse of children, something like that. If it's an appropriate case, refer it to this court. And they basically plead guilty as they've been able to negotiate the DA through their defense lawyer. They'll plead guilty to their offenses, and then as their probation, they'll be ordered to come to treatment court. Initially, it could be 2 or 3 times a month, and then over time, as they progress, less frequently. But they come to the court where the judge serves kind of like a company commander in the Army or in the military. They're the authority figure, and they're both encouraging them, in a positive way by telling them what they did that was great, that they're proud of them for, but then also holding their feet to the fire. And if they fail, giving them a sanction that's appropriate, but returning them, and then treating them with dignity and respect, and giving them a mentor to walk with them throughout this whole process. Probably the most important part of our Veterans Treatment Court is the veteran mentors. And I have to tell you, it's been the Vietnam veteran generation who were not treated well when they came home.
Horrible treatment. Yeah.
Awful. So they have stepped up and said, we want to be the mentors. And so they may not have experienced the criminal justice system like the one that they're mentoring, but they've experienced military service, and they have that in common. And these veterans, relatability, it's huge. And so, and then to realize that, hey, we really mean it when we say we're not going to leave, any soldier, any Marine, any airman behind. We're gonna stand with them throughout this court system. And at the end of this process, because we've dealt with their underlying condition with getting VA treatment, it could be substance abuse, but usually the most important type of treatment is the psychological counseling. And we get them a therapist that's certified in post-traumatic stress and confidentiality, and they're able to share their horrific experiences with this therapist, and then sometimes with their other fellow veterans, and fix the underlying hurt so that we can restore them and put them back in the community as productive citizens. And so that's the idea of Veterans Treatment Court. Unfortunately, Prop 47 kind of had an effect on our drug courts, lesser degree with our Veterans Court, but of minimizing the effectiveness of some of these courts, because when you reduce the sanction down to only a misdemeanor, we have to rely on their willingness to participate. And as you know, the human nature being what it is, sometimes we really need the encouragement of, I've got something being held over my head. If I don't go forward with this, there's going to be a sanction. Yeah. And so Veterans Court is still very effective. Unfortunately, our drug court that doesn't have the veterans component, and our drug rehab programs that we had before are very less attended, and so they're not having as big of an impact. But that's going to change, I believe, now that we're passing Prop 36.
Yeah, well, thank you for explaining that. Seems like an incredible resource for our prior servicemen and servicewomen to utilize.